All right, folks, today we're diving into a topic that's become so deeply woven into the fabric of our daily lives that most of us don't even think twice about it anymore. Social media, yeah, I know, it's everywhere. From the second we wake up and check our notifications to that last scroll before we hit the sack, social media has just infiltrated every corner of our existence. And it's a funny thing, right? What started as this tool to connect people, maybe catch up with a high school buddy or share some pictures with family across the country, it's turned into this enormous, all-encompassing beast that's shaping our minds, our opinions, even our worldview in ways we're not always conscious of. I mean, think about it. Social media didn't just change how we communicate. It's redefined how we interact with information and with each other. Every time we pick up our phone and swipe through Instagram or jump on Facebook or check what's trending on Twitter, we're not just looking at pictures or funny memes. No, we're being fed this curated, tailored version of reality that's been molded by algorithms, by these invisible forces that decide what we see and what we don't. And I'm not talking conspiracy theories here. This is just the basic structure of social media. These platforms are built to keep our eyes glued to the screen, so they give us more of what we like, more of what we're comfortable with, more of what gets us to keep scrolling. And man, let's talk about those algorithms for a second, because they're honestly genius and terrifying at the same time. These algorithms know us better than we know ourselves. You know what I mean? They know what kind of content will make us happy, what's going to piss us off, what's going to make us feel connected, or what's going to make us feel like we're missing out. They play on our emotions, our fears, our insecurities, our sense of belonging, and it's all calculated. You might think you're just catching up on some news or watching a couple of cooking videos, but these platforms are literally shaping the way you think, how you feel, and ultimately how you see the world. Think about it. Every post you see, every story you watch, every tweet you read, it's all part of this massive feedback loop that reinforces certain beliefs and keeps others out. And that's where things get really interesting and kind of dangerous. Social media has this way of creating what's called a filter bubble, this space where we only see stuff that aligns with what we already think. It's like being in a room where everyone's just nodding along with you, telling you that you're right, that your views are the right views. And that feels good, doesn't it? It feels safe. But here's the problem. It also isolates us from people who think differently, from ideas that challenge us, and from truths that might make us uncomfortable but are essential for growth. Now, let's be real. The world is more connected than ever, but in a strange way, we're more divided than we've ever been. Social media didn't create these divisions, but it amplifies them like nothing else. And you can see it everywhere, in politics, in cultural debates, in discussions around science and medicine, even what we think is fact versus what's labeled as fake news. It's gotten to a point where it's hard to know what's real anymore. Social media blurs those lines because everyone's got a platform and everyone's voice carries the same weight, whether it's a Nobel Prize, winning scientist, or some guy with a smartphone in his basement. And that's both amazing and terrifying. And here's another thing we don't talk about enough. The emotional toll it takes on us. You know that feeling, right? When you're scrolling through Instagram, seeing everyone's perfect vacations, their new jobs, their flawless relationships, and you start feeling like maybe you're falling behind, like you're not doing enough. That's social media's subtle power at work. It has this uncanny way of making us feel less than, of making us feel like our lives don't measure up to this highlight reel we're constantly bombarded with. And look, we're all guilty of it. We all post the best parts of our lives, the stuff we want people to see, but we never really stop to think about what that does to us or to the people watching. So if we're honest with ourselves, we're in this weird place where we're more connected than we've ever been, but we're lonelier, more anxious, and more uncertain than we've ever been. Social media plays on those fears, on that need for connection, for validation, for a sense of purpose. And it's not just some accidental byproduct. It's designed that way because the longer we stay in these platforms, the more ads we see, the more data they collect, and the more money they make. We've become the product. Our attention, our emotions, our very perceptions of reality, they're being bought and sold every single day. And here's the kicker. We're still so addicted to it. Even when we know all this, we still reach for our phones first thing in the morning. We still crave that dopamine hit when someone likes our post or leaves a comment. It's like this massive social experiment that we're all a part of, willingly or unwillingly. And I don't think we fully understand where it's taking us yet. I mean, what happens to a society when everyone's truth is different, when everyone's living their own version of reality? All right, here we go again. Now that we're getting deeper into this, let's talk about what social media does to our mental health. I'm talking about the stuff that's not as visible, the subtle shifts in how we feel about ourselves and each other. You know, we don't think about this when we're on Instagram or TikTok, but social media has a way of getting under our skin, like this constant low-level hum of comparison and judgment. We're scrolling through, looking at these snapshots of other people's lives. But here's the thing. These aren't real, whole lives. They're curated, polished, perfectly filtered moments. You're not seeing the arguments, the insecurities, the regular, messy, unfiltered reality. And even when we know it's all staged, it still messes with us. You can't help but look at someone else's highlight reel and think, why isn't my life that great? What am I missing? And let's talk about the way it drives anxiety, especially among younger people. There's this pressure, this relentless urge to keep up, to post the right things, to look like you're living this incredible life, and it's all happening in real time, 24/7. Back in the day, we didn't have to think about what the whole world thought of our every move. But now you've got people curating every aspect of their lives, their breakfasts, their workouts, their vacations. And if you're a young person, you're just inundated with these ideals you feel like you have to live up to. And what happens when you don't? What happens when you're just a regular person with a regular life? That's the thing. Social media doesn't really celebrate regular. It's about the extremes, the most beautiful, the most outrageous, the most controversial. And if you don't measure up, it's easy to feel like you're falling behind or just not enough. But here's the scary part. It's not just about comparing yourself to others. It's about this constant need for validation. Social media has trained us to seek comments, shares, little hits of validation that tell us, hey, you're seen, you're appreciated, you're valued. But what does that mean for our self-worth? If we're constantly measuring our worth by how many likes we get, what happens when the likes stop coming? What happens when the likes stop coming? What happens when the algorithm shifts and suddenly your content doesn't get seen as much? It's this roller coaster of highs and lows, and it's so easy to get sucked into. We're chasing these little dopamine hits without even realizing that it's rewiring the way we see ourselves and the world around us. Now, let's get into the whole concept of attention, because this is where things get really interesting. Mm-hmm. In a way, our attention has become one of the most valuable resources on the planet. These platforms are competing for it, fighting to keep us hooked, and they're getting better at it every day. They know how to grab us, how to keep us scrolling, how to feed us exactly what we want to see. And you have to wonder, at what cost? We're not just losing time. We're losing the ability to focus, to be present, to enjoy a quiet moment without feeling like we're missing something. We're training our brains to crave constant stimulation, constant feedback, and it's making it harder and harder to be alone with our thoughts. And think about this. Every time we're on these platforms, we're being influenced in ways we don't even realize. It's subtle, but it's there. You start seeing the world through this filtered lens shaped by what the algorithm thinks you want to see. If you're into fitness, you're going to get a flood of fitness influencers with their six-packs and meal preps. If you're into politics, you're going to see a constant stream of content that reinforces your beliefs, makes you feel like you're on the right side, It's like this echo chamber that slowly but surely narrows our perspective until we're only seeing one version of reality, one that fits our preferences, our biases, our habits. And it feels comfortable, sure. But it's also isolating. We're getting so wrapped up in our own bubbles that we forget there are other perspectives out there, other ways of looking at the world. And here's another layer to all of this. The way social media exploits our fears. We all know that negative content, anger, outrage, fear, gets more engagement. The platforms know this, so they push it. They feed us more of what gets a reaction, more of what keeps us on edge, keeps us coming back. It's almost like we're addicted to the outrage, to the conflict. You ever notice how people are quicker to jump into an argument on Facebook or Twitter than they would be in real life? It's because social media creates this environment where we're more reactive, more impulsive, more tribal. It's not just a place to connect anymore. It's a battlefield, and everyone's fighting for validation, for righteousness, for that feeling of being heard. And maybe the most insidious part of it all is that we know this stuff and we still can't break away. We know it's affecting our mental health. We know it's affecting our mental health. We know it's creating anxiety, depression, loneliness, but we're hooked. And why wouldn't we be? These platforms are engineered to be addictive. They're designed to pull us in and keep us there, to feed off our insecurities and amplify our desires. And so we keep coming back, even though deep down we know it's not good for us. So here's where we're at. We're in this weird place where we're more connected than ever, but we're also more isolated, more anxious, more divided. We're living in a time where reality is becoming this fragmented, personalized experience where everyone's truth is different. Everyone's reality is tailored to fit their own beliefs. And the question is, what's that doing to us? What's it doing to our ability to empathize with each other, to see each other as human beings rather than just profiles or avatars on a screen? What's it doing to our sense of self, our sense of community, our understanding of what's real and what's not? All right, so let's keep going. Now, if we're going to understand where social media is leading us, we have to look at how it's reshaping the very idea of community and human connection. I think this is one of the biggest paradoxes of our time. Social media was supposed to bring us closer, right? It was supposed to be this incredible tool to connect people, to build communities without the boundaries of geography, race, or social class. And in some ways, it has done that. I mean, people from all over the world can communicate, exchange ideas, and share experiences instantly. But here's the catch. In reality, it feels like the more we connect online, the more we lose that deep, real connection in our offline lives. Think about it. When was the last time you sat down with someone face-to-face and really connected? I'm not talking about a quick catch-up or a few texts back and forth. I'm talking about being present, having a conversation without distractions, without feeling the urge to check your phone every few minutes. Social media has given us this illusion of connection, but it's a thin connection. It's surface, level. We're connecting with people's profiles, with their curated digital selves, but how often are we connecting with the real person? And it's weird because even though we're surrounded by all these connections, we're lonelier than ever. Studies show that loneliness is at an all-time high, and social media is a huge part of that. It's like we're drowning in this sea of shallow connections while starving for something real. And it's not just about the loneliness. Social media is changing the way we relate to each other on a fundamental level. We're starting to see people as brands, as personas, rather than as whole, complex human beings. Everyone's crafting an image, a version of themselves that's polished, filtered, maybe even a little exaggerated. It's like we're all marketers now managing our personal brand, trying to put our best face forward. And sure, it feels good when people like what we're putting out there, but it also makes it hard to be genuine. It's hard to be vulnerable, to show the messy parts of ourselves when we're constantly curating this highlight reel for the world to see. And that's a problem because real connection requires vulnerability. It requires letting people see us for who we are, not just who we want them to think we are. And here's the thing. This whole system rewards the extreme. social media doesn't just want you to connect. It wants you to connect. It wants you to engage, to react, to keep coming back. And what's the easiest way to get people to engage? You make things polarizing. You make things controversial. And so we end up in this space where the loudest, most extreme voices get amplified. We see it in politics and social issues, in everyday conversations. Social media doesn't encourage nuance. It encourages tribalism. It wants you to pick a side, to dig in, to see the other side as the enemy. Mm-hmm. And when you're constantly exposed to this kind of content, it starts to shape the way you think, the way you see the world. It makes you more cynical, more distrustful of others, more closed off to different perspectives. This right here is one of the most dangerous aspects of social media. It's not just changing how we feel about ourselves. It's changing how we feel about each other. It's creating this environment where we're quicker to judge, quicker to cancel, quicker to write someone off because of a single post, a single opinion. We're losing the ability to disagree constructively, to have conversations where we don't all see eye.
Yeah.
And that's scary because at the end of the day, we're all going to have different views, different beliefs. That's what makes society rich. What makes society rich? What makes communities vibrant? But if we're constantly told that people who think differently are the enemy, we're never going to get anywhere. We're just going to keep dividing, keep isolating ourselves in these echo chambers where everyone thinks the same way we do. And I think we have to ask ourselves, is this the kind of world we want to live in? A world where we're constantly on edge, constantly reactive, constantly looking for reasons to be outraged. Because that's what social media is pushing us toward. It's pushing us to be these hyper-engaged, hyper-divided, hyper-distrustful versions of ourselves. And I get it. Outrage sells. Controversy grabs attention. Conflict keeps us hooked. But at what cost? What are we giving up in exchange for this constant stream of engagement? We're giving up empathy. We're giving up understanding. We're giving up the ability to sit with someone who's different from us and see them as a person, not as an opponent. I think deep down, we all know that something's off here. We feel it in our bones, this sense that social media is changing us in ways we don't fully understand, in ways we're not entirely comfortable with. But here's the kicker. We're so hooked that we keep coming back. We keep logging on, keep scrolling, keep engaging, even though we know it's not good for us. It's like we're trapped in this loop, this cycle of validation and outrage and loneliness, and we don't know how to break out. So where does that leave us? What do we do? I don't have all the answers, but I think it starts with awareness. We have to recognize the power social media has over us. We have to start questioning why we feel the way we feel when we're on these platforms, why we're so quick to judge, so quick to compare, so quick to lose ourselves in these curated versions of reality. And maybe we need to start setting some boundaries. Maybe we need to take a step back to reconnect with the real world, with real people in real time. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. The likes, the shares, the comments. None of that is real connection. None of that is going to fill the emptiness we feel inside. We're living in this incredible time where technology can bring us together in ways we never thought possible. But we have to be careful. We have to remember that these platforms aren't neutral. They're designed to keep us hooked, to keep us engaged, to keep us coming back. And we have to ask ourselves, is it worth it? Are we willing to sacrifice our mental health, our relationships, our sense of self, just to stay connected? Because if we don't start asking these questions now, if we don't start making some changes, I think we're going to wake up one day and realize we've lost something really important, something we can't get back. All right, let's get into what we can actually do about this. Because, look, it's one thing to talk about how social media is impacting us, about how it's shaping our minds, pulling us apart, making us feel disconnected. But what do we do with that knowledge? How do we take back control? How do we shift from just mindlessly consuming to actually living lives that are grounded in reality and real human connection and things that truly matter? And I think the first step, honestly, is to acknowledge that social media is a tool, a powerful tool, sure, but it's still just a tool. It's not inherently good or bad. It's how we use it, how we let it into our lives that makes the difference. We don't have to let it run us. We can choose how and when to engage, what to take from it, and what to leave behind. But that takes awareness, and it takes discipline, and it takes a real understanding of what we're giving up when we let these platforms have free reign over our attention, our emotions, our lives. So what does that look like in practice? I think it starts with setting boundaries. And I know that's not exactly revolutionary. People have been saying this forever. Limit your screen time, put your phone down, right? But think about it. When was the last time you actually did that? When was the last time you intentionally decided not to check your phone first thing in the morning or left it in another room while you focused on something else? We talk about setting boundaries, but how often do we really commit to them? It's about being intentional, about taking control back, one small decision at a time. Maybe it's as simple as saying, I'm not going to check social media before I've had my coffee. Or maybe it's deciding to take a digital detox for a day, a weekend, maybe even a week. Because when you create that space, you start to see things more clearly. You start to feel the difference between being constantly plugged in and being present in your own life. And here's another piece of it. We need to be mindful of what we're consuming. It's easy to scroll through and just take in whatever the algorithm throws at us. But that's exactly how we lose ourselves in this endless cycle of comparison and validation. Instead, what if we were more selective? What if we chose to follow accounts and pages that actually bring value, that inspire us, that make us think rather than just make us feel like we're not enough? What if we made it a point to question the content we're seeing, to ask ourselves why it's there, why it's being shown to us? Social media is full of great content, but it's also full of stuff that's designed to make us feel insecure, to keep us chasing some impossible standard. We have to get better at filtering that out, at curating our own feeds in a way that actually serves us rather than makes us feel worse about ourselves. And then there's the issue of connection, real connection. Social media has created this illusion that we're connected to hundreds, maybe thousands of people. But how many of those people do you actually know? How many of them do you really talk to, really trust? It's like we're trading real friendships, real conversations for these superficial interactions, for a quick like or a comment that doesn't mean anything. And it's not that those things don't have their place. They do. But we have to remember that they're not a replacement for real human connection. So maybe we start by reaching out to people we care about, by picking up the phone, by having face-to-face conversations. It sounds so basic, but these little actions are what keep us grounded, what keep us connected to what really matters. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're missing. Not more followers, not more likes, but real, honest connection with people who actually know us, who actually care. And look, we can't ignore the fact that social media companies are also responsible here. They've designed these platforms to be addictive, to play on our emotions, to keep us coming back. And I think it's time we hold them accountable. We need more transparency, more responsibility from these tech giants. We need to know how these algorithms work, why they're showing us what they're showing us, and what they're doing with our data. This isn't just about individual choices. It's about demanding a better, more ethical approach from the companies that have so much influence over our lives. Because if we keep letting them operate unchecked, we're just going to keep seeing more of the same, more manipulation, more division, more exploitation, and our emotions. But here's the thing. This is on us, too. We can't just blame the platforms and hope they'll change. We have to take responsibility for our own behavior, for the way we interact with these tools. We have to be the ones to decide that enough is enough, that we're not going to let social media dictate how we feel, how we think, how we live our lives. And it's hard, no question about it. It takes effort to unplug, to be present, to choose connection over convenience, but it's worth it, because the alternative, a life where we're constantly distracted, constantly looking for validation, constantly at the mercy of these platforms, that's not a life any of us really want. So maybe we start small. Maybe we set some boundaries. Maybe we reevaluate who and what we're giving our attention to. Maybe we decide to show up for the people in our lives in a real way, to have conversations that matter, to connect on a human level, and maybe, just maybe, we can start to shift the tide, because I believe we're capable of that. I believe we're capable of using these tools in a way that enhances our lives rather than diminishes them. It's just a matter of making that choice, of taking back control one step at a time. We're in this together, all of us, figuring it out as we go. But if we can approach this with intention, with awareness, with a commitment to what's real, then I think we have a shot at a life that's richer, that's more connected, that's truly meaningful, and that's worth fighting for. All right, so let's wrap this up by really thinking about the bigger picture here. We're talking about social media, but it's not just about the platforms or the algorithms or the tech giants. This is about who we are as people, about what we value, about what kind of lives we want to live. Social media is just a mirror. It shows us what we're drawn to, what we're afraid of, what we're afraid of, what we're afraid of, what we wish we had, and what we want the world to think of us. But it's not just a passive mirror. It shapes us right back. Every time we pick up our phone, every time we open an app, we're choosing to engage with this world that's been designed to hold our attention, to keep us coming back, to keep us hooked. And that's a choice, whether we realize it or not. It's a choice we're making over and over, and it's a choice that has consequences. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is, what kind of impact do we want to have on our own lives, on our communities, and on the people we care about? Because let's face it, we don't live in a bubble. Everything we do ripples out and affects the people around us. When we're present, when we're focused, when we're engaged in the real world, that has a positive impact on everyone we meet, everyone we interact with. But when we're checked out, when we're distracted, when we're living through a screen, we're missing out on life, not just for ourselves, but for everyone else who counts on us to show up. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is, what kind of impact do we want to have on our own lives, on our communities, and on the people we care about? Because let's face it, we don't live in a bubble. Everything we do ripples out and affects the people around us. When we're present, when we're focused, when we're engaged in the real world, that has a positive impact on everyone we meet, everyone we interact with. But when we're checked out, when we're distracted, when we're living through a screen, we're missing out on life, not just for ourselves, but for everyone else who counts on us to show up. And here's the thing. I think deep down, we all know this. We feel that little voice inside us saying, hey, maybe this isn't what life's supposed to be about. Maybe there's more to this. But we're so used to the noise, so used to the constant stream of content and opinions and updates, that it's easy to ignore that voice. It's easy to get caught up in the flow, to let ourselves be swept along by whatever's trending, whatever's buzzing, whatever's getting all the likes and shares. But we owe it to ourselves and to each other to pay attention to that voice, to listen to what it's really saying. Imagine what life could look like if we put as much energy into our real world connections as we do into our online personas. Imagine if we put down our phones long enough to really see each other, to have the kinds of conversations that make us think, that make us feel, that remind us of what it means to be human. I think we're all hungry for that. I think despite the convenience and the allure of social media, what we really crave is something deeper, something more meaningful. We crave relationships that aren't measured in likes or followers, but in memories, in shared experiences, in trust and understanding. And I get it, none of this is easy. social media isn't just going to disappear. It's part of our world now. And for all its downsides, it's brought us some incredible things too. It's connected us in ways we couldn't have imagined. It's given a voice to people who might not have had one otherwise. It's brought movements, ideas, and inspiration to millions. But like anything powerful, it has to be used wisely. We have to decide where the line is, where it's helping us and where it's hurting us, and then have the courage to act on that. I think at the end of the day, it's about balance. It's about finding a way to use these tools without letting them use us. It's about knowing when to engage and when to step back, when to share, and when to keep something private, when to connect online and when to show up in person. And yeah, that's hard. It takes awareness, it takes discipline, and it takes a real commitment to living life on our own terms rather than just following along with whatever the digital world says we should be doing. But here's what I believe. We have the power to shape this experience, to decide what role social media plays in our lives. We don't have to be passive. We don't have to let it control us. We can be intentional. We can set boundaries. We can build lives that are rich and full and meaningful with or without social media. And if we start doing that, if we each start making those choices in our own lives, that's how we change things. That's how we take back control, not just for ourselves, but for the generations coming up behind us, because they're watching us, right? The younger generation, the kids growing up in this digital world, they're looking to us to figure out what normal looks like. Yeah. They're learning from us what it means to connect, to communicate, to find purpose and meaning. And if all they see is us glued to our phones, obsessed with likes, constantly chasing validation, what message does that send? What kind of world are we leaving for them? But if they see us taking a stand, if they see us choosing to live fully, to engage with the world in a real way, to value relationships over followers, then maybe, just maybe, they'll see that there's another way to live. A way that's richer, deeper, more authentic. So here's what I'm saying. Let's take that stand. Let's choose to be present, to be intentional, to be mindful of what we're letting into our lives and what we're putting out into the world. Let's remember that social media is a tool, not a destination. It's something we can use to enhance our lives, but it's not the whole of life itself. And if we can make that shift, if we can remember what really matters, if we can focus on what's real, on what's lasting, then I think we're going to be all right. We're going to find that balance, that sense of purpose, that connection we're all craving. And maybe, just maybe, we'll realize that the best parts of life aren't happening on a screen. They're happening right here, right now, in the moments we share, in the relationships we build, in the time we spend truly living. So let's get out there and do that. Let's live, because life, real, unfiltered, uncurated life is too precious to waste.
All right, now we're down to the heart of it. If we're really going to talk about social media, we have to talk about freedom. Not freedom in the traditional sense, but the freedom to live a life that's ours, not one that's influenced, shaped and directed by a platform or an algorithm. We talk a lot about being free, about the American ideal of living life on our own terms. But in some ways, social media has started to steal that freedom from us. And the crazy part, we let it happen. We invited it in, let it set up camp in our lives, in our minds, in our relationships. And for what? So we can feel connected, so we can stay relevant, so we don't miss out on the endless scroll of other people's lives. Somewhere along the way, we got hooked on this idea that in order to be somebody, we have to be somebody online. And I think it's time we ask ourselves, what does that cost? Because freedom isn't just about being able to go where you want, do what you want. It's about having control over your mind, over your time, over your attention. And if social media is calling the shots, then what kind of freedom is that? This goes deeper than just logging off or setting boundaries. It's about redefining what freedom means to us in a world that's constantly pulling us in 100 different directions. It's about having the courage to say, I don't need to be constantly connected to everyone and everything. I don't need to prove my worth or validate my life through a screen. And that's hard. It's hard because social media has become this measure of success, of relevance, of worthiness. But the truth is, none of that is real. The followers, the likes, the shares, they're all just digital smoke and mirrors. They don't define who we are. They don't make us happy. They don't make us whole. And if we're constantly chasing that, constantly looking to social media to tell us who we are, then we're never going to be truly free. Imagine if we took back that freedom. Imagine if we stopped looking outside ourselves for validation and started living in a way that feels true to who we are. What would that look like? Maybe it's simpler. Maybe it's quieter. Maybe it's less glamorous, less filtered. But I think it would feel more real. I think it would feel like peace, like contentment, like coming home to ourselves in a way that we haven't done in a long time. And honestly, that's what we're all searching for, isn't it? A life that feels like ours. A life where we're not constantly comparing, not constantly seeking approval, not constantly trying to keep up with this endless, exhausting cycle of digital validation. We're searching for freedom, for authenticity, for a sense of purpose that isn't tied to how many people are watching, liking, or sharing. And maybe that means we step back. Maybe that means we get comfortable with missing out, with not being in the know all the time. Maybe it means we put down our phones and start looking around at the life happening right in front of us. The friends, the family, the conversations, the moments that don't need to be shared or posted to matter. Because here's the thing. Life is happening whether we're paying attention or not. And if we're too busy looking down, too busy scrolling, too busy chasing that next hit of validation, we're going to miss it. And that's the real cost. Not just our time, but our experiences, our memories, our sense of connection to the world around us. So here's my challenge to you, to myself, to all of us. Let's reclaim that freedom. Let's choose to live fully, to be present, to let go of this need for digital approval and start finding worth within ourselves. Let's be the ones who decide what matters, who decide where our attention goes, who choose what's worth our time. Let's redefine success, not as how well we perform online, but as how well we live, how deeply we connect, how true we stay to who we are. Let's break the cycle. Let's set ourselves free, and let's live a life that's not for anyone else's approval but our own. Because that's what real freedom feels like, not being bound by the expectations of others, not living for the applause of strangers, but living in a way that's authentic, grounded, and completely, beautifully our own. And that's what I hope we can all find. Not just a break from social media, not just a little detox, but a real, meaningful shift in how we approach our lives. A shift back to what's real, to what matters, to what fills us up in ways that a screen never could. So let's take that step. Let's choose presence over distraction, connection over comparison, freedom over validation, because we only get one shot at this life, one chance to make it count. And I think we owe it to ourselves to make it real, to make it ours, to make it worth every single moment.